Welcome to the final public conference Enhancing Resilience and Media Literacy of the Ukrainian Community in Lithuania. It's very nice to see you all, policymakers, journalists, active civic society representatives. So before we start, I think it would be very good to explain why we gathered all here today. So it's not a secret that today thousands and thousands of Ukrainians came to Lithuania looking for shelter and looking for support. And although the Ukrainian community in Lithuania is very active, engaged, nevertheless, the people are still a little bit lost in information sphere. And a lot of Ukrainians, they are relying still on Ukrainian media sources. They are still don't know which Lithuanian media they can trust. They don't know where to find the exact information, and most of them are using social media as the main source of information. That is why we can say that everyone today is living in some kind of a hybrid warfare, and that's why it's very important, because we are not talking only about media issue, but it's our daily life routine, daily experiences, daily choices. So all this media literacy and resilience, it's affecting not only how we are consuming media, but also how we are participating, how we are acting. Do we have a trust on the government and other organizations? Based on that, Ukreate Hub initiated the big project, Enhancing Resilience and Media Literacy of the Ukrainian Community in Lithuania. And I would like to acknowledge that this conference and the project itself are supported by the Resilience Initiative of the German Federal Foreign Office and implemented by Ukreate Hub and the Open Lithuania Foundation. The goal is simple. It is the goal to strengthen information resilience not through assumption, but through real data and practical experience. So, shortly to say how the project was done, first of all, it consists of three key elements. First one was conducted a big research, survey and expert talks to understand the needs and to understand how in general Ukrainians in Lithuania consuming the information. Secondly, based on those findings, was conducted public trainings and lectures in order to give Ukrainians a real practical experience that they can use it in daily life. And third and final, it is our today conference, through which we will not only hear the finding of the research, but we also will hear expert talks. We will find out what are the challenges and what Lithuania and Ukraine can learn from each other in terms of information, in terms of information resilience and media literacy. So, my name is Anna Rusgenia. I'm a journalist, I'm a TV host, and I will be moderating our today conference. So thank you again for being here today, and I think we can start from our first speech. So it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Cornelius Zimmermann, German ambassador to Lithuania. Dr. Zimmermann has been a dedicated supporter of democratic resilience and international cooperation, and we are grateful for his presence today. So, please.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Rusgenia, for this nice introduction. And ladies and gentlemen, dear Sandra Adomavichute, thank you for inviting me for this conference. I take pride that we are your partners and will be lending our political and financial support to this project. My team is also present here. Auxe is having the lead, is also here, her boss, Mrs. Hook, and Mrs. Rösser, a practitioner. So you see there's a strong interest from the German side, and I think no need to stress that you have all followed the news, not only in Lithuania, but also in Berlin. Our Chancellor is really, how shall I say, doing whatever he can in order to help to facilitate a just and equitable and sustainable peace in Ukraine by bringing the sides together. Let's see what Moscow in the end will say. I'm not too optimistic, but at least that would give us a consolidated position of the Western Hemisphere, including Ukraine. And I think that's already a step forward in gathering all those who are in support of Ukraine. And there's another important topic just before I get to my speaking notes for today. The Chancellor is also very dedicated to bring about solution for the good use of the Russian frozen assets, which I think will give the EU own leverage in that process, something we need because, I mean, the conflict in Ukraine is basically also about Europe. And as many Lithuanians say, the Ukraine is our first line of defense. And overlooking the process of stationing a brigade in Lithuania, I can only agree, Ukraine. Our attention should be primarily devoted to Ukraine and to a good solution of that process. And so this conference is dealing with information. I think that's key. Communication is, I would say, is our unique selling points as diplomats in this conflict. And as long as the weapons will be only used for training purposes, I think the word is essential. And the communication, that's why we put a lot of our resources into communication. And I really welcome your project. Because this cruel war which Russia is waging against Ukraine is accompanied by a massive Russian disinformation campaign and hybrid attacks. And we have been observing them in Europe since the annexation of Crimea at the latest. So these tactics, that's well known, aim to sow division, erode trust and undermine our societies. These are challenges not only Ukraine, Lithuania, but all of Europe is facing today. And in 2016 already, Germany set up the so-called Resilience Initiative. That the idea was to support project the Baltic states to support them in strengthening media literacy and critical thinking, as well as to combat disinformation. So what we do, what the team of this embassy does under the leadership of Ms. Hoek, is we invest in education and training and awareness to empower citizens with the tools to discern truth from manipulation. Basically, I think the key is education if we want to counter disinformation effectively. So I'm very glad that this conference is also part or parcel of our resilience initiative. You are pinpointing Ukraine, and I think rightly so, since Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, the Ukrainian community has become an important part of Lithuanian society. I think there's 50,000 or so Ukrainians. How many? Yeah, 50,000 Ukrainians living in Lithuania and being very well received. And I'm really, how shall I say, motivated by the strong and warm support you're not only giving it to our soldiers, but also to Ukrainian refugees. And I witnessed that personally at an LRT program this year when, together with the Ukrainian ambassador, I participated in a discussion about the Radarom project, which of course we strongly support. Yeah, we only share your view that helping to strengthen the resilience of the Ukrainian people is in our shared interest. We want to ensure that the Ukrainians here in Lithuania can navigate information floods and integrate fully, and thereby become part of our shared future. So I'm very much looking forward to the findings of this study, which will be presented today. And I think we will be of interest to the Ukrainian community and to the Lithuanian society. And we will contribute to take another step in the integration of Ukrainian people here in Lithuania. So I wish you well for that conference. I have to say that unfortunately I cannot stay, but part of my team will stay behind. Yeah, so we are looking forward to the presentations of your findings, of your survey, media consumption habits of Ukrainians in Lithuania, and the following discussions. Thank you very much, and I wish you a very good exchange, a lot of inspiration, new creative ideas, how we can, shall I say, get a common understanding of what is lying ahead of us, because we need to stay united if we want to overcome the challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cornelius. And I'd like to now invite Sandra Adomavičiūtė, Director of the Open Lithuania Foundation. The foundation plays the key role in strengthening open society values, critical thinking, and civic engagement in Lithuania.
Please. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cornelius Zimmerman, Your Excellency Ambassador, distinguished guests, dear partners, and colleagues. Before I go to my speaking points, of course, I want to express that although you said it's not very optimistic what Germany is doing for Ukraine, we still have some hope, and let's work what we can do best in our country. Okay, so it is a great pleasure to welcome you today to the conference, Enhancing Resilience and Media Literacy of the Ukrainian Community in Lithuania. Thank you for joining us and shared commitment to strengthen democratic resilience in time of profound change. First of all, I would like to express great thanks to the German Federal Foreign Office for the support, and of course the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany. This event is taking place thanks to your contribution, which underscores the importance of strengthening democratic resilience, supporting independent civic society initiatives, and addressing shared challenges in the information space. The importance of today's topic extends far beyond any single community or country. Across Europe, the ability of societies to navigate complex information environment has become a strategic priority. The European Commission, for initiatives such as the European Democracy Shield, has clearly recognized that democracy today depends not only on institutions, but also on citizens' capacity to access reliable information, think critically, and participate responsibly in the public sphere. These priorities are echoed in other European strategies, digital security and media strategies, all of which acknowledge that the global information environment has become increasingly fragmented, faster, and more difficult to navigate. Algorithms, platform dynamics, and constant information overload shape how people form opinions, make decisions, and relate to each other. In this context, media literacy and information resilience are essential democratic competencies. Lithuania today is a home of more than 90,000 Ukrainians, yes, who now form an important and visible part of our society. Most arrived as a result of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, seeking safety and stability. While displacement may begin with a physical journey, it does not end upon arrival. It continues through the complex process of rebuilding daily life, restoring a sense of security, and finding one's place in new social, cultural, and information environment. In this context, integration is not limited to access to services or employment. It also depends on the ability to navigate in an increasingly complex information space, one that is fragmented, multilingual, and shaped by global digital platforms and algorithms. Ukrainians in Lithuania find themselves at the crossroads of Lithuanian media, Ukrainian and Russian language information flows, and social media ecosystems. This constant information pressure influences perception, emotions, and everyday decisions, making media literacy and information resilience essential for both individual well-being and social cohesion. At the Open Lithuania Foundation, strengthening civil society has always been central to who we are and what we do. Our mission is to support democratic culture, civic participation, and critical thinking. In 2022, we opened our doors and our hearts to Ukrainians. Initially, we provided modest support through networking opportunities and small-scale financial assistance to the most active community members. As we witnessed strong leadership emerging from grassroots levels, we expanded and adapted our initiative, and together with the leaders, we established Ukreate Hub, a space designated to empower and activate leaders within the Ukrainian community displaced in Lithuania. Ukreate Hub was created as a platform for long-term integration, resilience, and active civic participation. Over time, it has grown into a vibrant community space with a strong focus on women's empowerment, leadership development, and professional growth. Through entrepreneurship and leadership programs, as well as cultural and educational activities, Ukreate Hub has supported Ukrainians in developing ideas, building networks, and remaining active members of civil society, both here in Lithuania and in Ukraine. This year, we took a further step by deepening our understanding of the community's media literacy needs. Today's conference is a part of the pilot project that builds on the experience and focuses specifically on the media literacy and information resilience. Our recent research and engagement with the community have provided valuable insights. You will hear today many findings. However, I would like to point several concrete needs. Trusted Ukrainian language information points in Lithuania, practical example-based media literacy support, moderated community spaces instead of chaotic chat groups, and rapid access to verification during moments of heightened tension. And the Open Lithuania Foundation, together with our partners and other donors, we take these findings very seriously. While no single organization can address all needs at once, we are committed to responding where we can by supporting practical media literacy initiatives and continuing to invest in community-based solutions. This event is not the conclusion of this work, but an important step forward. Before I conclude, I would like to draw attention to the important moment for media freedom in Lithuania. In recent days, proposed legislative changes affecting the governance of LRT, our national public broadcaster, have raised serious concerns among journalists, media professionals, and civil society. Independent public media are a cornerstone of democratic resilience, trust, and informed citizenship, values that lie at the very heart of today's event. For this reason, I would like to invite you all who are able to join today the peaceful protest taking at 6 p.m. at Seimas in support of editorial independence and freedom media in Lithuania. Standing up for free and independent media is not only a professional responsibility, it's a civic one, and it concerns us all. Dear guests, thank you for being part of this conversation. Your presence has contributed and will contribute to building a more resilient, informed, and inclusive society. One can meet today's challenges with confidence and solidarity. I wish you all meaningful and productive events. Thank you very much. Sure. Yes.
Mr. Adamovich, thanks very much for your response, and of course we're looking forward, but I would just like to avoid to be misunderstood. I mean, the efforts undertaken by the German federal government, of course, are driven by a spirit of can-do and of optimism. And I think the fact that the Chancellor was able to bring together the Europeans, the Ukrainians, and the Americans in Berlin speaks for itself. And of course, we are all longing for a peaceful resolution of this conflict. But I mean, in the end, it takes two to tango. And I mean, Russia could end this war today, now, but just telling the troops to withdraw. And that remains to be seen. And as a diplomat, I served for 4 years in Afghanistan. Of course, you have to be an optimist. If you don't believe in progress, I think you shouldn't get involved in civil society, or you should you shouldn't give. How shall I say? Then you have to give up your beliefs. That I don't. And of course, that's why I'm here. We're working for a better future, and we will relentlessly work for it. So just, I'm not a pessimist, and I'm not pessimistic about the outcome. I think it's a necessary process. It might take a while. I hope it doesn't. And of course, we would all like to have peace by Christmas or even before. But let's see. But I'm very grateful that since May we are having a very committed German government. Only 2 weeks and 2 days after his assumption of office, the Chancellor traveled to Lithuania to participate in the inauguration of the brigade Lithuania. I think it shows that we have understood what is at stake, and that we are taking the necessary measures. And of course, Ukraine is uppermost on our mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, I think we are all hopeful, and as all Ukrainians, we are grateful for the European support of our country. And now we can, I think, move on to our expert talks. There are going to be several presentations, several expert talks, so please keep in mind that after every presentation we will have open questions and answers, so please be active, and I hope we will have a productive, practical time. So it's my pleasure to invite our first expert, our first speaker, Dr. Nerijus Maliukevičius, Associate Professor at Vilnius University and a leading researcher on information warfare and strategic communication.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I am puzzled to speak about Lithuanian experience in tackling disinformation to Ukrainian audience. I mean, unfortunately, usually resilience comes from reacting to crises, and Ukraine is ongoing war of aggression as well as war of information aggression against Ukrainian society. And this resilience, I think, comes in a sense naturally, where when you learn the hard way, the lessons. The same goes with countries neighboring authoritarian leaders like Lukashenko and Putin. This is Lithuania's experience of tackling disinformation and propaganda. But I want probably to link my talk to your own experiences, and especially invite to think in networked terms, how we can actually combine our efforts, Ukrainian experiences, your community experiences, and our Lithuanian experiences in tackling this new type of challenge, security challenge. So I would like to start maybe from a simple distinction when we are speaking about various definitions. You could hear probably multiple of those, like information warfare, like hybrid threats, like active measures, and you name it. Now the popular term is cognitive warfare, and that's a new buzzword around. But I want to put it in a very simplistic terms, in a sense that from one perspective, we are faced with aggressive misinformation, disinformation strategies, which are, technologically updated, but they are in a sense creative, and in the creative in a malign perspective. And this goes in description of general, process like that, by which people exchange information and seek misunderstanding, disagreement. Russia, Lukashenko, and other authoritarian leaders are trying to deepen those divides among communities, clashing those information bubbles and so on. And in this regard, when we are speaking how we can become more effective, more resilient in tackling those challenges, definitely you just can put this definition upside down and think about effective strategic communication, where the process is by which people exchange information, seek understanding and agreement. As simple as that. You use your language to create communities, not divide and clash them. And in this sense, I think sometimes those very novel modern definitions distract us from very, very simplistic, proactive approaches. So when speaking about Lithuanian experience in resilience, I thought, it's a cold season, viruses are around, and resilience is, in a sense, immunity of, the entity, the organism. So this organism can be individual, personal immunity, or personal resilience towards manipulation, but it can be a social, like countries' resilience to malign information operations. And in this regard, if we are speaking in the purely biological terms, healthcare terms, how you tackle viruses? Well, you put on clothes, you put on layers, you maybe take vitamins, you prepare your organism, your system to tackle those attacks against you. In information perspective, you can think in maybe similar terms, and the resilience comes not in a very simplistic one recipe approach. Everything can be solved by maybe just education, just media literacy, and so on. It's always combined, and it's always multi-layered. And probably when I'm coming back to the creative approach and personalized approach, it is the way you actually build those layers upon layers, and the combination of those make you resilient to a certain type of attacks and operations. And in this picture, I would suggest thinking about Lithuanian multi-layered resilience approach as, again, kind of a complex layers, which starts with Stratcom, the same proactive strategic communication competences, where you are not ending up in constant propaganda battles with malign narratives, disinformation, propaganda narratives. You have your own proactive story to tell to your internal public, to external public, in various languages. Unfortunately, somehow, when we are speaking about battles, information battles with Russia and Putin, we are too much fixated on Russian language. And I think in proactive terms, the strategic communication should be Ukrainian as well as Lithuanian, should be competent and reaching for English language audiences, especially in Europe and America, because actually, when you think about it, this is where the hearts and minds lie, where you fight your fight really for the support, for the sympathies, and so on. The civic engagement layer is enormously important when we are discussing, debunking initiatives, when we are discussing potential monitoring initiatives, simply initiatives like yours initiative. It's an NGO-driven initiative, and this is not, purely institutional and governmental hierarchical structure in the sense. You really have to have this civic engagement in the whole process. I usually, when I'm speaking to international audiences, I cherry pick this, brand of elves fighting trolls, in Europe and elsewhere. Everyone loves that. Well, tell us more about it. But this is actually, again, a civic, engagement into the battle in the virtual realm, where you can actually mobilize various elves who want to fight trolls, right? You have even a kind of a mythological story behind it. And you fight this battle with, malign information operations. Again, civic layer. Media ecosystem, I mean, now we are discussing, protesting, fighting for actually our media ecosystem, which should be effective layer in countering not just potential Lukashenko's or Putin's disinformation. It's about all potential manipulations, populist manipulations of local type, and so on and so on. And this is enormously important because basically, from Lithuanian experience, if you look through those various cases of very specific disinformation attacks that come from Kremlin, usually they, you can see those messages in social networks, you can maybe notice them in some postings and so on. But the thing that keeps, this from becoming a bigger problem is the media journalist layer who recheck this information, who debunk this in many ways, and then keep this not so much engaged in disruption of our information and nonetheless regulatory oversight. I mean, the legal system is still important layer in the whole resilience system, where you actually go after hate speech, you actually go after war propaganda cases and so on. And in Lithuania as well as in Ukraine, we probably were one of the first ones who, based on that, went after Russian state TV channels who were engaged in hate speech cases and so on. So I would urge you to think maybe some layers are not here. Maybe we could add additional layers and think on, I don't know, cyber layer, which would be as well effective one, and so on. But just to provoke you in thinking that there is no silver bullet or one golden recipe that solution of just one thing will solve all potential disinformation and propaganda challenges. I would like to move forward with contemporary issues of how those threats, now come into very specific context. And in our environments, it's the context of elections, where those malign operations are actually directed into, electoral processes and so on. And in this regard, in Europe, there is this definition of FIMI, the Foreign Information Manipulation and Interference, which in EU reports is being described as, threats to democratic values, procedures, and political processes, and which is usually quite well coordinated, conducted from actors from outside, but nonetheless as well inside actors. And this is a real challenge, while we are at the same time discussing the rise of distrust in traditional institutions, democratic institutions, in electoral processes, in media, and so on. The malign actors tend to make those problems even worse and proceed with several kind of targeted approaches. You can, in this regard, target information consumption during elections, right? So you can speak about general information consumption, not necessarily during electoral cycle, but when it's election time, usually on this, kind of misleading information, you in the end are taking a very important personal decisions on voting and or non-voting even, right? So targeting citizens' ability to vote, at the same time depressing the motivations to go out and vote, is again kind of one of the approaches of those malign actors. You can actually cherry pick specific parties and candidates and go after them in such kind of operations. You can degrade trust, continuous trust in democracy, and actually you can add up a very technical aspect. You can go after cyber, manipulation of electoral infrastructure and make those problems even worse. I don't want to maybe stay too long on this. There is an even explanation on how those attacks can be organized in time progression and in phases. But I just want to say that all over Europe during last this big cycle of election, we were faced by various actors and attacks like that. And I usually use this screenshot from Lithuania, which at first sight could be funny. I mean, we know this actor Vaitkus, who is constantly in conspiracy, mode and so on and so on. But two messages behind him are basically the templates of Putin's Kremlin's propaganda throughout various countries in Europe. Georgia went through those. Everyone is being challenged with that. So it doesn't mean that those actors should come somewhere from outside. You have the challenges from inside, and the main concern is, from my perspective, is not so much how many votes or how much popularity those actors will gain. The main concern is that they are going after specific democratic processes, degrading them, and paving an environment where potential authoritarian candidates and actors could come into our political system. So moving forward, it's two complicated last slides, but I would like to end maybe with 10 recommendations how we can really think about fortifying democracies in such kind of environment. I think one of the important aspects, although I mentioned how NGO and civic sector is important, still a governmental structures, institutions that deal with strategic communication is important, and you should really think through, responsibilities for especially crisis communication in times of information attacks, disinformation campaigns, and so on. In Lithuania, we have our National Center for Crisis Prevention, which is constantly, evolves under various crises, be it crisis with migration, be it balloon crisis, but this is how you go through the process of learning in various crises and go out stronger and more resilient in the end. Various resilience campaigns, which really, can be organized by governmental initiatives, by NGO initiatives that, target specific communities. This is one example, the one that we are speaking right now, your project results, but there are issues. Me personally, last week I had experience, media literacy with seniors in Panevėžys, the group called Bochi. And believe me, the challenges are totally different as they would be with the young ones, in schools and so on. And you cannot use the same template with ones and the others, and you actually have to really enhance those campaigns and work on various audiences and so on. Enhance early warning system. This is I really think this as one of the important issues, because more and more we are entering the stage of computational and propaganda, automated propaganda, and there is more and more noise, more and more sustained campaigns that sometimes start without notice, and you really can miss this moment where you would need to start reacting. So this early warning system should be maybe twofold. First is technological, where you actually use the same AI to go after malign disinformation messaging and so on. But at the same time, it should be internationalized, where you follow through what campaigns are going on, for example, in your neighboring countries, like in Latvia, like in Poland, because usually those same campaigns later come into your environment. I have one specific example when Lithuania was under attack of those fake bomb threats to our schools. I went for discussion in Montenegro, and they actually were looking at me, well, we lived through this several months ago. And they were telling that we actually had the same strategy that targeted our infrastructure with those fake messages. In Ukraine, we know you had the same, fake attacks against your institutions and so on. But if you start being isolated and not, gathering this experience from your partners, that leaves you just alone and more vulnerable. Really thinking about secure media infrastructure. Usually we are speaking in cybersecurity terms, we are speaking about critical infrastructure, meaning utilities, finances, electricity, and we are missing one point. More and more actually disinformation campaigns target specific media outlets, internet portals, with quite technological attacks, meaning hack and leak and other approaches. And in times of crisis, manipulation of a big scale with combined cyber and disinformation approach can have a really bad result. So I think the thinking about how to secure media infrastructure from those cyber attacks is an important aspect. I just will be short on media literacy. I think we should stop speaking just about ad hoc projects, about projects where you know, 1 week you are going to schools, the other week you are discussing those with maybe some other audiences. We really need to include this into education, into educational program, and you know, I'm hoping that potentially, you know, one, you know, minister or the other of education would come up with his, you know, portfolio with this, and that would be the goal of one or the other coalition to really sustain this for long term and systemic, right? And the last ones, really, when we are speaking about debunking initiatives and tools, I think more and more the important part is really to develop such tools that would be easily accessible to anyone who would like to, you know, double check, to geolocate, to do image verification, and to make them easily accessible for general public, right? Not just for specialists, and that specialists would do the OSINT analysis and so on, to make it more accessible. Really to think about legal, you know, updating legal framework, especially for new media. In Lithuania now we have a new initiative and a big discussion. There is an initiative by opposition party to criminalize disinformation. It is now in discussions, but this is just to illustrate that this, as you remember, this layer of regulation and legal layer is still it evolves, and it's really an important layer. Thinking really about international cooperation with like-minded partners in West. I mean, we are challenged here by Russia and Belarus, but if you talk to colleagues in Taiwan, for example, they are challenged by the same authoritarian neighbor, you know, just, you know, political agenda may be a bit different, and you should really learn from each other on this, in this regard. And I mentioned this already, so I will wrap up with this, really to start thinking more effectively about English language visibility of your proactive communication, and really investing more into this, because just to put it simplistically, the real battle for hearts and minds is actually happening in the English language ecosystem, and usually this is where all you know, massive Russian efforts with Russia Today and other projects are, and we really need to counter this with our own effective, when I'm speaking our own, so it's Ukrainian, Lithuanian, you know, pan-Baltic efforts really to reach out for those Western audiences. Especially in the United States, I would provoke you to think. So that's probably it from me. As it was mentioned, there's a possibility to...
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for insightful presentation. So are there any questions? So please.
Thank you so much, dear Dr. Neris. It's always very interesting to hear your speeches, which is very practical and understandable. I have a question. Maybe it's not so systematical, but I was really surprised a little bit about the Stratcom. And when you said about that one way of working with disinformation is creating your story and narratives. At the same time, in the beginning, you mentioned this definition, which is the process by which people exchange information and seek misunderstanding and disagreement. And I'm not sure that it's a question, but I just want your perspective on this point, that it's something which is more deep, and it's about mindset of people. Yes, if you're seeking for disinformation, it's about my intention, my mood, I don't know, my consciousness, that I am seeking for this kind of, I'm thinking in this way to find disagreements. and which means that it is in this spiral of different perspectives, levels where we can work with this information, in which level we can, and what practically we can do in order to change this mindset to the looking and seeking for agreements instead of disagreements, and how it is connected and how we can use this creating new stories as a Stratcom. If I'm clearly...
I think I understand that this is really a good question, a really complex one, and I actually may maybe take it from the various perspectives. But I think one thing that you really touched rightly, it's not just about this. The targeted miscommunication and disinformation and propaganda, but the internal sometimes biases that lead to those information bubbles and so on. And this is really, a big challenge, because I think from a countering perspective, I would maybe touch two things. I think really in many initiatives, we forget, in a sense, we forget the audience as being an active participator in the whole, in this, problem. And meaning that really we should maybe teach the audience to make conscious decisions on why they are ending up in one bubble or the other, and teach them to actually be more maybe emotionally resilient about the decisions of picking sources and picking those messages and so on. Because when we come into such information bubbles with our debunked information and so on, this can end up as a end up into the wall, because really the emotional state is totally different, and this is why they ended up at the first place in this situation. So probably I would say this is an important issue, and I missed that the other, but I think this is really about teaching conscious decisions with how you use your media, right? To really teach the audience on emotional resilience on this, yeah.
Just from my personal human being perspective, that for me as a Ukrainian, it's still a challenge to be on both agendas. I mean, Ukrainian one and the Lithuanian one. But at the same time, I receive this feedback from Lithuanians that, and we want to be like, and I'm considered to be like an active Ukrainian, but still it's a challenge for me to be fully engaged in the what is going on in Lithuania, yes, politically, socially, criminally, and whatever. And what I experience, I received this feedback that Lithuanians want, or Lithuanians wish we be more engaged and live with a local agenda after 4 years being here. And but what I experienced, this is a language issue actually. I mean that, for example, I use LRT as a main source for information, and what I observe that there is no translation. Most of materials which is Ukrainian translated is not about the local agenda. It's something which is about Ukraine, or which I can easily find in our media. And in English also is not always about local, and how I find information. And if I want, I ask just my neighbors and peoples and Sandra what people are talking about. But again, this is a bubble, we just connected to one bubble or another bubble, and you cannot be like independent in how you just find information. And to translate is always takes time, which is a real expensive, which is not, it's always a limit if you need to translate, and you just go to another source, something like this. So this is just another maybe how we can engage Ukrainians more to the local agenda, is to make news or to teach us Lithuanian, I don't know.
If I may just shortly, I think you probably do realize that in Lithuania, language is very important. You know, if you look into our history, into our identity, and the one who invests in learning Lithuanian language and approaches Lithuanian audience community like that, you will build bridges and but. When I said that, then it caught me thinking that actually everything is about effort. It's not, in communication, even in, challenging, malign information. It's about effort, investing into finding real sources, real kind of facts. Expert information. If you want to really engage into Lithuanian communities, learning language, interacting, and so on. And this is not just to say how it may be challenging, difficult, but just to show you how this offensive part is very simplistic. It doesn't need this kind of effort. It just bombards with emotional, triggering, dividing messages and so on. And this brings again to our past discussions that in this type of environment, somehow you need to ease a bit this effort, and for audiences to really show the factual information, the expert information, that it would be easier, read through and visible. And in this regard, AI may also help somehow putting it into more visible situation. But that's a constant battle, constant challenge, actually. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other question?
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. First comment just on the discussion before. As Ukrainian who lives in Lithuania for the last 4 years and learned language, yeah, that helps very, very much in integrating. But I wanted to ask you about, do you consider generally the algorithm in social media? Because let's be honest, like 90% of information that's consumed by most population is coming from social media. And if social media platforms have some bad intentions, let's say so, they can tweak algorithm in any way, and all your efforts to build, to resist information and so on. Because I'm sort of introducing here representing platform that it does not do such thing, Wikipedia. But that's the other story. But do you consider this as a factor in your work?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a very painful factor. I mean, and then the reality check. I mean, this is how I would say algorithms work. The rage biting now, the word of the year is exactly the illustration that they are really automating and giving more visibility to exactly the rage that the information and emotions that divide and so on. So, I mean, I'm kind of speaking from a bit of idealist maybe perspective, but in this sense, technology should be used as well to kind of fight off those challenges and maybe, raise the visibility of exactly, the factual expert information and so on. I'm again coming back to the issue of conscious use of information. In the end, I think we will end up in not so short time, with audiences simply isolating themselves from the social media, and because of that. I mean, in my classes, more and more I get Erasmus students that are detoxifying from Facebook or social networks just because of that, right? And then we will have again a kind of new challenges of new media, authentic media or some other stuff. So, but that's that is the illustration of how the evolution of media naturally creates problems in itself, and then malign actors come and abuse all the potential for their benefit, right? So I'm becoming a bit skeptical and fatalist in this regard, but you know, things will get worse before they get better.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think, Dr. Nerijus, you are tight on schedule.
You. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Dr. Nerijus Maliukevičius. And we definitely will find more about how Ukrainians consuming media and their habits in our next presentation from our expert. As I said before, one of the key elements of this project was to find out the habits, how Ukrainians are consuming information here in Lithuania. And we already heard some remarks and some comments about it, that it's not enough information in Ukrainian language about local situation. So I'd like to present our next speaker. I'm introducing you Urte Andriukaitytė. So she's a disinformation and OSINT analyst at the Civic Resilience Initiative, and she will present us the key findings from the research on media consumption habits of Ukrainian in Lithuania. Please.
Thank you. Right. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Huge honor to be standing here in front of you today. And I'm delighted to share some insights from our joint research with the partners. And yeah, perfect. So yeah, it's been a very challenging yet very interesting journey, analyzing these habits and having all these talks with local Ukrainians in Lithuania. This research looks at how Ukrainians living in Lithuania are navigating information space. And I'm not talking about what they are reading through the headlines, but what they and how they trust what to believe, what to ignore, and how they react to disinformation, to exposure of disinformation in their everyday lives. I'm glad and kind of relieved that this whole topic is finally attracting or starting to attract the attention it actually requires, because the importance of this topic is undeniable. I heard that already some numbers of Ukrainians have been discussed today, but according to the up-to-date information, we already passed 100,000 of Ukrainians, so that's a fair part of our community. And their resilience to disinformation is not only the business for themselves, right? But it's closely linked to the resilience of Lithuanians and to even more linked to the safety of Lithuania. So the more resilient and safer they feel in information environment, the safer we all are. So without further ado, let's kick it off with the research aim. And the aim of the study was to understand how Ukrainians living in Lithuania navigate a complex information environment. And it's important to understand that they are still following the news from their home country. They are trying to adapt to Lithuanian media landscape and are being exposed of Russian language content all at once. And I'm well aware that many Lithuanians are overwhelmed with one side of the information flowing in. So imagine being tripled in size and the intensity. So it's very important to understand their own perspectives. Its research also aimed to examine the exposure of disinformation, misinformation, and any manipulative information that we found across. It was also important to see how they react, whether and if they check any kind of sources they're using, and also how they react to disinformation while looking for patterns in vulnerabilities related to already discussed language barriers, location, both where they are living here in Lithuania or where they come from back in Ukraine. The trust was also analyzed, and then it became one of the most important factors in the study: which sources people trust more or less and why, and whether they try to verify information before first believing in it, and the second before sharing it with wider audiences. Ultimately, the research is meant to identify ways, and I think it's very important, how we can support the community through media literacy, access to reliable sources, and practical guidance for navigating both local and Ukrainian news. And I think the whole point of this research is not just to make a research and show the results and said, okay, we did something on the issue, but actually come up with some specific guidelines that we could follow and bring it to the action to help Ukrainians in real life. Even though this whole research is kind of pioneer level, I'm really hoping that it will be a good start for other future researchers with even larger scopes, and as mentioned, leading and accelerating real action. So this whole research was led with very few simple questions, actually. Where do Ukrainians in Lithuania gather information? How often they feel encountered by false information? How do they decide whether it's something is trustworthy or no? And we also looked at whether experience differ depending where people live, what language they use, and many other variables. Whole research design, to answer all these questions, we used a mixed research design, which consisted of anonymous survey that was conducted together with the partners, and more than 50 Ukrainians living in Lithuania took their time to be a part of it. We also held focus groups discussions and expert interviews. The idea was to combine patterns from the survey with way deeper insight from conversations on personal level, and then compare those with way more generalized insights from field experts. The study involved Ukrainian residents living in different parts of Lithuania, and we tried to be as conclusive as possible on this case, so of different genders, different ages, different times spent in Lithuania, different education, and many other variables, like as many as we managed to find. Focus groups were smaller in size, so people could totally freely express their opinion without any judgment. Everything was totally anonymous. They could withdraw from the research as if they wanted to. Spoiler alert, nobody did. Everybody was happy with that and happy to also hear that this topic is coming to attention. Experts included journalists, educators, NGO representatives, and media professionals who work closely with Ukrainian communities on their daily basis. And I'm really happy to see some familiar faces that actually took a part in this research in the audience. And timeline was very restricted. It took part from October to December, but the thing that it only ended this month, it shows that data is very, very fresh. Survey responses gave us an overview of media use and trust patterns, while focus groups and interviews allowed us to explore emotions, examples, and everyday practices. So mixed methods of surveys, FGDs, interviews, and secondary open source intelligence data, just to get a way broader context for disinformation space, both in Lithuania and for Ukrainians living in here. Analysis was conducted in thematic analysis for qualitative data and descriptive statistics for quantitative data. Some noteworthy stats, and they are most most linked to anonymous questionnaires. So that absolute majority of respondents, so nearly 90% that took part of our questionnaire, actually came in Lithuania in February or from that time. So they are kind of newcomers in our country. Only 10% have been living here longer and before the full-scale invasions kicked off. 90% of respondents clearly cited war-related reasons for relocation, and it's an interesting case of wording, because less than 30% actually mention word war for their relocation and try to somehow go across that. They said that they are the lack of some kind of resources, blackouts, safety of children, safety of themselves, but they avoided the word war. But 90% of them are somehow related to the reasoning. I think the only question that all of the participants agreed on is that disinformation is a serious and a widespread problem. So it was the only one that got 100% answers in one way. And 65%, that's also an alerting number, agreed that disinformation is a serious problem, and specifically in Ukrainian community living in Lithuania. Across all the variables that we took in counter, like ages, cities, integration levels, time spent in Lithuania, education emerged as the strongest prediction of whether a person tends to verify information that one consumes. That's a bit strange, odd placing, but despite that, just to understand a bit the context a bit better, I think it's important also to review how Ukrainians are not also become the target of disinformation, but also a topic of disinformation targeting Lithuanians inside our country. So they are not only recipients, but a topic that is used more than any one of us would like it to be used. I've been in this field for over 8 years, and in the field of disinformation. And since the war broke out in Ukraine, since the day one, anti-Ukrainian sentiments have been the top 3 narratives pushed by Kremlin-aligned media in Lithuania, and it hasn't changed. The only one more consistent narrative that we ever experienced was anti-government, and it's still the top 1 in Lithuania, and I think it will be like for ages. But just to understand how important and how consistent anti-Ukrainian narratives are, it also provides us with very interesting change. When the full-scale invasion broke out, Kremlin put some effort to prove Lithuanians that Ukrainians that are coming to our countries will do a lot of bad stuff. They've been pictured as wrongdoers. They have been pictured as those who are stealing our own money. That they are basically, if we don't do anything, they'll come and take over our country. Then, when the time flow, narratives change a bit, and Kremlin-aligned disinformation shifted to anti-support for Ukraine, trying to discredit any efforts that Ukraine would ever win the war, and that knowing that Lithuania has been one of the most prominent supporters of Ukraine, they try to somehow convince to withdraw any kind of support that we are providing. And now it seems like in up-to-date data in last 2 or 3 months, it came the full circle, and the narrative came back again to anti-Ukrainians that are coming or living in Lithuania. So this shift also once again highlights the importance of the people from Ukraine that we are having here. Even though some of them are really well integrated, they are still being actively targeted by Lithuanian disinformation in our country. And just to emphasize again, among all those different picturings of Ukrainians, financial burden that they bring to Lithuanians is the most important one, and I also noted that in the slides. Going to the findings of the research, we should start with information intake. And yeah, as mentioned before, the info landscape that Ukrainians are dealing with is enormous and very intense. Free-sided languages and information and disinformation coming in is even talking about it gets me overwhelmed. So I can't even imagine how it's feeling to deal with it. Telegram, not surprisingly, came up as the first and the most often used source of information for Ukrainians living in Lithuania. What I found a bit of surprising, that above 50% of respondents agreed that it is the least trusted one. And when they were asked this question, they could pick as many answers as they wanted, and they still settled for Telegram, and some of the respondents only picked Telegram as the least trusted source what they are using. So it's a bit of an odd, option. Another finding which is very important, that the differences between Ukrainian and Lithuanian media. Ukrainians that were participating in our survey agreed that Ukrainian media cannot be truly trusted, but it's super easy to access. Yet Lithuanian media, by default, despite the sources, is more likely to be believable and trusted, yet it is too hard or way harder to access for Ukrainians in our country. So what we come across is that Ukrainian news are still overly dominating Lithuanian news and Lithuanian news intakes for those who live in Lithuania, despite the time that they spent in our country. Just to add the last thing, it is also very interesting how many respondents admitted that core home news are Ukrainian, drawing a very fine line between home they are physically living in here in Lithuania and the actual home that they are feel like attached back in Ukraine. And there's no better way of telling that but in the lips of Ukrainians and our respondents. So they admitted that they are in Ukrainian information space every minute, 24/7. And I just loved this quote because it really corresponds to the speed and the engagement in Ukrainian news. And yeah, they are not, what we get is that the Ukrainians are not trying to ignore Lithuanian news in any way. But as we see, the speed and the close relation to home news are the dominant variables in their information consumption. Talking about vulnerabilities that we came across, a major vulnerability comes from language, and it has already been mentioned in here. For example, Russian-speaking Ukrainians often told us in our research that it's not always clear who they are interacting with in Lithuania, especially online, and people may present themselves as local or fellow Ukrainians, but actually spread Russian and pro-Russian narratives, and it's especially case in the cities near Belarus borders. But language, as mentioned, is a huge barrier that avoids Ukrainians from getting Lithuanian-related news, and also the habits, which explains the Telegram usage, because in Lithuania, yet the percentage is way smaller of usage of Telegram than in Ukrainian community. Another very, very important vulnerability is emotional exhaustion, and I think it's not only for Ukrainians, but for general audiences as well. People are constantly exposed to news related to war, dramatic updates, and emotionally charged content. So participants admitted that whenever they are stressed or tired, and you naturally get tired from all this intake, it's getting hard to evaluate information with a cold head. And even real information can become harmful in this case if it's presented in a way that spreads panic or hopelessness. This topic really correlates with the disinformation space, because as one participant put it, propaganda doesn't just attack the facts, but they attack the psychological states and emotions. And discussions over Russian information space were really prevalent, and absolute majority, above 90% of respondents, noted that Kremlin-aligned information is one of the factors that are making this whole navigation through information space so hard. Another case, no better way of putting that than the respondent themselves. So, as Lithuanian media are usually by default taken as more and easily trustworthy, Russian, on the other hand, is always brought up with some kind of suspiciousness. Despite these challenges, Ukrainians in Lithuania are not passive, and was also surprised and relieved at the same time to hear the results from the resilient side. Many of Ukrainians actively try to protect themselves by checking multiple sources, talking things through with friends or family, as audiences already mentioned, and being cautious about what they share. And even though such kind of simple media literacy things as cross-checking sources is not yet even a basis for Lithuanian audiences, so it's very good to hear and to see that Ukrainians are taking it as a base level of how you consume the information. They are also aware of disinformation tactics and how the headlines and going right into your emotions work. And they also use multiple sources and responsible reporting, so really thinking and discussing before actually spreading the news. And what I found also very relieving, that even 78% of respondents indicate that they either always or often verify their information. So of course it's self-evaluation, also it only from the people that were active enough to take part in our survey, but still the number is very, very good. Coming to some kind of key recommendations from this whole report. First of all, even though it might sound paradoxically after talking with the experts and knowing that there is Ukrainian LRT channel to reach Ukrainian audience in Lithuania, based on all the FGDs, anonymous questionnaires, and talks with field experts, it all comes in a way to one conclusion, or the main conclusion, that Central Ukrainian Language Info Hub is necessary, including Telegram, based on the habits of Ukrainians living in Lithuania. But still, everyone admitted that the absence of a platform, centered platform with all the information, with all the news that coming in fastly, is one of the things that would way ease the navigation in information space. Also clear guidance on the reporting suspicious content. As mentioned, Ukrainians are well aware of disinformation online, and they manage to distinguish the real information from disinformation, yet they are not well aware how to cope with that and what to do while getting in Lithuanian info space. And of course, practical media literacy supports, like a lot of different were mentioned throughout the interviews, but even like small posters in very visible community spaces, on-hand workshops or guidelines would help really much. Another recommendations coming from community support side is undeniable role of NGOs in this whole process. And many NGOs in Lithuania are already providing media literacy trainings and trusted information, but they often lack sources, and it usually comes back to very tiny and limited financial sources. Also practical support, practical support that actually reflects the community diversity, because especially when talking to field experts, a lot of those highlighted and emphasized that community and those 100,000 of Ukrainians living in Lithuania are not very homogeneous community, and it very depends whether they came after the full-scale invasion broke out in Ukraine or way years before. So reflecting those differences might be crucial in this whole support thing. And of course, raising broader resilience, including language courses, as Nerijus mentioned before. Learning language also really help to navigate way easier in this information space. And of course, it requires some resources. So putting resources into that and increasing integration and tightening communication networks would help Ukrainians to feel better in our country, thus making us feel better in our own. Some very short key takeaways. That it's not surprising that Ukrainians, as mentioned, are exposed to fragmented information, and I believe it's far away from easy navigating through that, but they are still very active, and they are actively verifying content and do not buy everything that they come across in information space. So that's promising start. That's strange mismatch that most used social media platforms are actually least trusted among Ukrainians. According to information intake, even though they are physically here, informationally they are back in Ukraine, and with tiny recommendations and like comparably tiny actions, we can actually help with it and bring them into Lithuanian full-scale information. Undeniable role of NGOs and the need to finance them in case of integrating Ukrainians more. And yeah, the promising numbers of media literacy percentages and structured info, as mentioned, that information platform that could solve not all the problems for sure, but a fair part of those. So yeah, very shortly from me and from this whole research. Thank you.
I think it is not only insightful because we see the clear picture where we are standing right now, but also we can understand the direction we should move to in order to change those habits and to help maybe in some way Ukrainian community that are living here. And now it's time for questions. Does anyone has a question? Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have a question regarding what did the respondents say about Lithuanian media in Russian language? For example, like Delphi Russian version or LRT Russian version. Do they use it and do they trust it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good question. Actually, it came up basically in discussions. And as mentioned with that sound quote, fair part of Ukrainians are suspiciously seeing any kind of Russian content, even though it's LRT, and even though who are aware what LRT is, the language itself is repellent for them. The only part that they mentioned is still trustworthy was the LRT Russian, but yeah, whatever they come across in Russian language is a bit of no-go for them. I don't remember, and there definitely was no specific Russian language sources that were mentioned as, okay, even though it's Russian, I can follow and fully trust it. So maybe that's why so many of respondents mentioned that we cannot understand Lithuanian language yet, and we do not anything in Ukrainian. And Russian language sources was not even in this whole discussion. So we're not getting Lithuanian, we don't have Ukrainian, where do we stand at? So if I answer the question.
There was one.
Also, some of the respondents in this case are not talking English at all. So it's mostly in discussions. It's either Lithuanian that they are cannot use or also regarding this point, some of respondents said that they are trying then to use other languages, both Russian and English, but they understand that the more handwork they are doing to reach for information, right, like entering in Google some kind of news in English or in Russian in Lithuania, the further that process goes, the less trustworthy the information they get is.
Yes, please, next.
Yeah, thanks for your research. I will play a little bit of devil's advocate and try to poke you with a question that I think you kind of missed a little bit in your research. Have you at all considered like researching the paid and not paid sources as news sources as a reason for this kind of landscape? Because traditionally Ukrainian media and for Ukrainian people, we are not used to pay for getting news. Basically, if some people are coming to Lithuania and you can get Delphi only by subscription, or you can get like 15 minutes LTI also only by subscription, maybe that's the reason. Because I suspect it is. So, have you considered doing something in this regard?
Just to clarify, you mentioned paid, right? That you need to actually pay. In neither of the conversations, any kind of similar solution came up. And I don't know whether people were not brave enough to admit themselves that they are payable. I think LRT and Ukrainian are not payable for sure. And it still doesn't come across as a source that they would use. And as mentioned before, it's a good point to take into consideration. And alongside with other limitations that we already had in this whole research, of course, it should be taken into consideration. But as mentioned, it didn't came across. And also the language and the habits that I mentioned before still seems to take a bigger role in this whole media consumption than the paid walls for the sources. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thanks.
Anyone else? Yes.
Thank you, Urta, so much. I know this research was more of a very quick, small sample, so sort of diagnostic. As a researcher, where would you take it next if you would have to, build up on this research? What would you, which questions would you ask? Where would you go deeper for the next phase, if there is a next phase? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the question. Yeah, it actually was very time constricted. And of course, for more clearer insights, I think bigger scope of Ukrainians and experts also should be included, because we are making our conclusions from a very, very small points of Ukrainian community here in Lithuania. I think a very good start for any kind of action would be trying to gather that concentrated info space and to see whether it's actually any kind of game changer, right? So starting with bigger audiences and giving them a taste of their own medicine in a way, just trying to see how that info hub or any kind of concentration works, and whether it works, and if it works, how it could be advanced, and whether it's not, should we take the whole survey into another ways of dealing with the issue. So I'm not willing to talk about only very theoretical things, but I am already, after this small research, I'm more likely into getting into actions to actually ease the lives of not very interesting information navigation.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, one more question.
Доброго дня. Дякую за ваше дослідження. Можна українською, бо я англійською трошки.
I can translate.
Окей, thanks. Дуже дякую за важливе дослідження. І хотів запитати, якщо можна, трошечки з іншого боку дискусії, бо вплив пропаганди, він же ж на всіх розповсюджується. І чи змінилося відношення литовців, якщо є така інформація взагалі, відношення литовців завдяки пропаганді Кремля на українців і взагалі на українську війну і на все, що відбувається? Дякую.
The question is, did the Lithuanians change their relation to Ukrainians because of Russian Kremlin propaganda? Is there any results of it that we can see?
Thank you so much. I would say, fortunately, no. And one of the most primary things where, as disinformation analysts, where we see the differences, if the narrative actually works, it stays the same for a longer time. And the shifts that I've mentioned from taking Ukrainians as the whole problem, then shifting to discrediting Ukraine's effort to win the war, then shifting to anti-support for Ukraine and so on, and then getting the full circle back to anti-immigrant and anti-Ukrainians narrative, that would show that it's not actually working. And also we didn't have any protests anti-immigrant so far, and hopefully we will never have. So I would gladly say that it hasn't had impact at all, because it still might affected some soul people, but not a huge impact that we would monitor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Urta. Once more time. And yes, please, big applause. And we are moving to our next speaker, next expert, Vilūnė Kairienė. She's a data strategist and media analysis expert at Mediaskopas. So please, welcome. Stage is yours.
Welcome, everyone. It's so nice to be here. So let's dive into the media and see what's inside it and what Ukrainians and as well Lithuanians do see every day. Mediaskopas is a media monitoring and analysis company. We do monitor more than 650 sources in Lithuania. It covers radio, TV, online, and print media, so everything we can capture. And then we analyze it and say what narratives we see, what's inside it, basically. So why it is important? The studies show that more than 2/3 of society has their opinion shaped by the media. So what do society see about nationalities, different nationalities, about migrants, is really important. Here is the dynamics of the mentions of migrants in Lithuanian media, and it's basically 100 news items a day. Is it okay now? So it's more than 100 news items a day about different nationalities, about migrants, and this is what shapes our perspective on them. Mediaskopas does researches about nationalities a lot. We do search for the narratives, and we then speak about what we should change in order to change the narrative. These are some examples. But seeing the broad perspective is also important. Here is the one study from Singapore. It was issued this year. And it says that while the state promotes a narrative of intercultural harmony, the media subtly reinforces hierarchies of the class and race. So even in this multicultural country as Singapore, they have the same problem. The media shapes the picture. Another really interesting study, it was issued this year on May, says that when minorities are shown in a positive light, it strengthens empathy across all age groups. So not only liberals or young people, but across all age groups. So positivity in the media is really important. Let's see Lithuanian media and what nationalities are mentioned the most in 2021-2025. So Ukrainians, of course, takes the 22%, the biggest part, then the Russians, Polish, Germans, and Belarusians, and then the others. Why did this happen? Of course, as you can see the dynamics, it just spiked when the COVID and invasion happened. So we had a lot of mentions of Ukrainians because they came to Lithuania, mostly because of this reason. For this year, we have Germans in the first place, and this is really interesting because the narrative shifted to the security and not the minorities or different nationalities living in Lithuania. Let's see what are those narratives. So main four narratives are the war, community, history, repression, and prosecution. And Ukrainians take the most part of the war narrative, of course. Let's see national minorities. The picture here is really similar. Ukrainian national minority, Lithuanian national minority is the mostly mentioned, then the Russians, Polish, Belarusians, and Tatar. So let's see what labels are attached by the media to those nationalities. Ukrainians are mostly portrayed as strong, heroes, patriots, and a successful integration is also mentioned a lot. So as we heard from Urte presentation that Russians tried to put this narrative that it will be bad for us that Ukrainians will come to Lithuania, we are happy to say that this didn't happen, at least in the media. Successful integration is one of the biggest parts. Them being heroes and strong also takes a lot of media attention. However, this narrative is positive, but also fragile, meaning that any bad situation, any crisis will be on the spotlight if it's concerning Ukrainians. While Russians have a totally different narrative, more than almost 70% of the media is saying that they are influenced by propaganda. Also, Nazis and orcs are the labels they get in Lithuanian media a lot. There is a little part of ordinary Russians. So those are Russians living in Lithuania for ages, and they get this collective guilt because of what happened and because of the invasion to Ukraine. Concerning Polish people, because Poland is our neighbor, so we have a lot of politics, a lot of military context, a lot of general history and national context. So it's something concerning them being near us, but not any kind of big crisis or something like that. Belarusians, they are between being victim and between being a threat. So we are speaking about provocations and we are speaking about being influenced by propaganda as well. Also, we have this ordinary Belarusian, as we had in Russian case. They are seemingly just living here. They are ordinary. They have nothing to do with war and so on. But still, there is the same collective guilt as we have with the Russians. And Tatars, it's culture without conflict. We are speaking about history, about culture, about communities, and so they are like left behind. They are spoken a lot about, but most of the historical prospect, not something that is happening now. Nationality in headlines is really important. A lot of studies shows that we do check the headlines mostly and don't go deeper to the articles. So these are the headlines of mentioning nationalities, and we have here a lot of positiveness as well because of the Ukrainians, because we tried to help them. A lot of businesses and NGOs did some initiatives, raised money to help Ukraine, and so on. But headlines are not always positive. Here we have one headline that was issued this year, by the way, about a drunk Ukrainian woman who was involved in an accident in Vilūnė, in a car accident. A lot of countries suggest not to mention nationality in the headlines or in the article if it doesn't change the situation or it doesn't explain something. So these are the examples where the nationality is really not important, because a lot of car accidents and any drunk accidents happens for Lithuanians as well. So checking the titles and seeing it these days that people are writing and putting nationality in the headline is really not helping to change the narrative, especially if it's already bad. So, but we have also the same situation concerning Lithuanians, just when these accidents happens abroad. So this is also some kind of reputational damage to the country, seen as reputational damage to the country. So then Lithuanians are mentioned in the titles as well. But if this happens in Lithuania, they will never mention that Lithuanian did this. So I was short quite because we were behind, but I'm kindly waiting for the questions.
Thank you very much. Before any questions, I'd like to ask, as we all know, the migrants we're talking about, it's coming not from Ukraine, but from other countries. And a lot of countries are using Russian language as their main language of communication. And do you see that the perception of Russian language in Lithuania changed since the time when there is a lot of migrants came here, or actually whether is that positive change, or actually Lithuanians are more not nicely hearing and don't want to use this language anymore as it was before?
Yeah, we hear a lot of situations when Lithuanians refuse to use Russian language. We have a lot of articles speaking about this as well. Actually, life for Russians and for Belarusians as well became a lot harder after the invasion, because they are seen as being guilty as well for not taking actions, for not doing anything, for not standing up and speaking about that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? There is. Yes, please.
It would be interesting for me in which light German migrants are shown in Lithuanian media.
I guess we don't see a lot of information about German migrants, mostly about German soldiers. So they are shown as also in a positive kind of way as defenders, as partners, as a part of the defense system that we have and we have to strengthen. So the migrants and Germans living and working simple, normal jobs are not seen because of the situation in the defense system, because of the war. So all the spotlight is for the war and for defense for now.
Thank you. Any other questions? If I may ask one more. What usually triggers this shift from positive narratives to negative ones? Because we all see with the Belarusian case, it was in media, firstly, Belarusians were portrayed as victims. They were accepted in Lithuania, then changed with the full-scale invasion to Ukraine, and the image of Belarusians changed. What is actually causing this shift and how it is portrayed in media?
Crisis always is the biggest part of the changes in shift of the media picture, and we had a lot of crises concerning Belarus. It's not only migrants near the border, but now we have this balloon crisis. So the picture of Belarusians as a people, as a society, is just totally negative for these days, only because of the crisis that we get and the problems from Belarus.
But the question is, can this shift happen to Ukrainians that are now here? Can the Lithuanians change their thinking about Ukrainians because of something might happen? Do you think it's possible?
I would not say that it's not possible, but it would be really hard because of the work and because of the picture, because of the reputation they have built for now. And as we saw, them being as an example of successful integration, so it would be really difficult to change that because the people should change. So I think it's possible maybe, but I don't believe it could happen.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you, Vilūnė. Thank you so much. So, dear guests, now we will have a small break. It's going to be 25 minutes. So you can have your coffee, you can talk to our experts, and please keep in mind that if you didn't register yet, please do it near our coffee tables. So please do registration and take your badge. So we can move forward to our next presenters and our next experts. They are going to join us online from Ukraine, and our first presenter, Anastasia Nadia Kuchar, is an analyst and lecturer at the Molfar Intelligence Institute in Ukraine. So please welcome her, and let's hear more about disinformations and some insights from Ukrainian side.
Hey, hello, I will share my presentation now. So can you see the screen? Is everything okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. So yes, as you mentioned before, I will tell about our work in information space, and we will review some cases of Russian disinformation. But first, I will tell a little bit about ourselves. We are a Molfar Intelligence Institute, and we are like an education center. We give lectures, trainings, and so on, and also an impact center who are fighting disinformation. So we cooperate with government, civil society, some organizations, media outlets, and here you can also see the list of our donors. Yes, and a little bit about some figures. So more than 7,000 people attended our trainings. Up to now we have had more than almost 400 trainings and covered more than 200 topics. Our team has 7 members, and we already have more than 100,000 followers and 4,000 students on Udemy. So first, let's cover how trust in media looks in Ukraine and what can be the grounds of disinformation spread here. So here you can see a little bit of statistics here. It is a research conducted in April 2025 by the Rating Group and commissioned by the NGO Lviv Media Forum and International Media Support. And according to this research, the most popular source of news in Ukraine are Telegram channels, and actually almost 52% of Ukrainians use it as the main source of information, like all the time or like 4-5 times a week, which is really a lot. On the second place is YouTube content, and here more than 30% of Ukrainians use it as a source of information every day or often. And the next goes Facebook. And talking about the trust to the media, Ukrainian it is quite low, and only Telegram channels or YouTube content has quite high level of trust. For example, these are like 29% for Telegram, and for YouTube it's like 24%. And what is can be really problematic is that United News Teleton has a very low level of trust, only 30%, and only 38% of Ukrainians check the information they receive, check the media source, and together with that, only 18% always check the source of information. Together with that, 17% of Ukrainians claim that they can distinguish false media from the truth information, and for 21% it is difficult. And based on this information, there was also a test for Ukrainians to test their vulnerability to this information. And unfortunately, 59% of Ukrainians are vulnerable to this information, and only 41 are not vulnerable. Talking about this, which is really interesting, that amongst those who are vulnerable, the same amount of people claimed that they can distinguish false information from the true information, which is the same, actually, almost the same number as in those people who claim that they are not vulnerable to disinformation. And what is a real problem here is that people who claim that they are people who are vulnerable, they don't check the information, they trust mostly on their internal feelings regarding news. They don't trust in official media very much, and so on. And yes, they are less likely to support Euro integration and integration into NATO. Often they are bilingual or Russian-speaking Ukrainians who, for example, will trust different claims about discrimination of Russian-speaking people in Ukraine, and so on. Together with that, we can see that most Ukrainians agree that Russian hybrid warfare is increasing. Yes, it's 81%. And among the threats that Ukrainians see, 42% of people see online recruitment by Russian special services for committing crimes, 32% of Ukrainians see fake news as the greatest threat for our safety and security, and 23% see cyber attacks as the greatest concern. Yes, and talking about some case studies, actually we discussed that Telegram channels are like a great tool of information for a lot of Ukrainians, and that yes, people tend to use it as a main source of information, and Russia can easily use it for recruitment and the misinformation spread. For example, in May 2025, a 21-year-old Ukrainian was detained in the United Kingdom because for the arson at Keir Starmer's home. Nobody was injured or something like that because the house was rented, but still the Ukrainian was obtained, and according to the research, he was actively looking for, he came to the UK in March 2022, and he was actively looking for a job. Actually, before the attack, as before the arson, he left more than 200 messages on different Telegram groups looking for a job of any kind. And also, as we noticed, his email was registered on Casino. He was a member of different groups connected with investment, which are presumably also fake, with cryptocurrency and so on. So he was actively looking for any source of money, and such kind of people are very vulnerable for the recruitment by Russian security services. Yes, special services, I mean. So presumably he was recruited by Russia too. Other people were Stanislav Karpyuk, who was also has some ties to Russia indirect, and another one was Petro Pochenok. Yes, this is like an indicator that Russia will uses vulnerability of people, they like a difficult situation, to use them in their favor. Another case is actually more positive. It is about the prevention of a terrorist attack in Ivano-Frankivsk. Russian special services contacted with a 15-year-old girl. Yes, they tried to recruit her and make a detonator and place it in a park to be detonated like remotely. But the girl decided to contact Ukrainian security services, and they later coordinated her, and thus they succeeded in preventing the attack. Another plus for this informing was that our security services could understand how the Russian can recruit people, and not only they could prevent the attack, but also to learn more about the methods Russia's use. But still, again, a young girl is kind of a vulnerable category of people. which Russia used. And actually, yes, it's unemployment in Ukraine is quite a serious problem because of war and migration and so on, and this and lack of money and so on. Russia can use these all factors in their attacks. Recent statistics shows that 63% of companies reported difficulties in recruiting staff in 2024, and from 2021 to 2025, the number of employees decreased by almost 11%. And together with that, the proportion of working pensioners increased from 24 to 27%, so which means that there is a shortage in active labor. The source is Kyiv School of Economics, who gathered statistics from different official sources of Ukraine, for example, Ministry of Economy, State Statistics Service, Pension Fund, Employer Service, and so on. And the Kyiv School of Economics notes that the labor market remains in state of a structural crisis due to war, migration, demographic aging, and shortage of skilled workers. So here you can see the statistics, and yes, it's quite problematic nowadays. Now we'll talk a little bit about Russian fakes and trends and innovation which Russia uses in its propaganda. So first tactics which it uses is divide and conquer. So actually it has used it for many years, and for example, this claims that one region is better than another, that Donbass fits all the Ukraine, and the rest of Ukraine is ungrateful, and so on. And then Russia didn't stop this operation disinformation, but now it is replaced by a comparison of the situation with power outrages during a full-scale invasion. Yes, for example, here you can see a comparison between regions who will have electricity and who won't, so that maybe the focus will shift from the Russia to the regions who don't suffer from electricity outrages so much. And connected with this is polarization of society. So Russia tries to create some illusion of misunderstanding between Ukrainians, so that even small topics which Ukrainians don't discuss on became some great issue and may seem like a great issue. And Russia actively uses these tactics to continue spreading some of its information, news, and so on. And also, Russia tries to inflate the people's distrust through the government. Especially, it happens when the communication between government and society is not very clear. Then, when some decisions are not explained, and so on, or the government has to take some difficult decision. Then Russia tries to pick some topic and spread this information, saying that government doesn't care about people, the government is deceiving people, and so on. And in difficult times, it can, yes, they can succeed in such disinformation. Another modern innovation in Russian propaganda is use of Telegram channel. Usually these are anonymous Telegram channel, and they don't always look like pro-Russian. Sometimes they can see like Ukrainian channels, for example, Ukraine Today, and so on. I mean, it's just an example, not the exact channel, or Real Kyiv, and etc. Yes, due to they are anonymous, and some messages may even seem real, but the topics can be manipulative. For example, about the recruitment centers, yes, and mobilization in Ukraine. They can do some surveys and so on. And this manipulative topic, when there are some discussions and so on. Yes, so it can also raise some mistrust, disinformation, and despair amongst people sometimes. And talking about the results which Russia uses, it not only it acts in Ukraine, but it also tries to target relations between Ukraine and the EU. And for example, the EU Regional Disinformation Resilience in collaboration with the EU-funded Disinformation Awareness and Resilience Project team, they investigate Russian propaganda narratives in different regions of Ukraine. They debunked some information about the EU-Ukraine relations, and they conducted a survey which showed that a survey in the summer of 2025, which showed that Russia tried to like raise those mistrust between Ukraine and the EU patrons. For example, they noticed that Russia tried to spread messages that EU prolongs the war in Ukraine and that its aggressive policy against Russia provokes it or something like that. And what is really dangerous is that quality of this or such disinformation messages becomes better and better, so it becomes more easy to trust. And not only attacks in Ukraine but also in Moldova. In particular, proclaiming propaganda have been accusing the Moldovan government of ruining traditional values, Russophobia, and persecution of dissent, actually the same as it does in Ukraine. Here you can see an example where, for example, is a poster from, as Russian channel said, a border between Poland and Ukraine, where Poles will check the Ukrainians for any Nazi or Bandera-connected symbols, which is, of course, not true, but still it can spread mistrust between our people. What else? Proclaiming propagandists are employing a range of disinformation tactics to deceive Ukrainians, including emotional manipulation threats, creation of different fake videos, fake visuals, and so on. They want to demoralize Ukrainians, spread discouragement, and so on. So yes, they will use any tools and any tactics that they can. And in addition, maybe you have noticed that for some period there were messages that, for example, EU promised to pay every Ukrainian some amount of money, and then there is a link to some bot on Telegram. So Ukrainians follow the link, they list some of the personal information in these bots, and yes, then those people will have private information about Ukrainians, which they can later use for further disinformation campaigns. So here you can see the examples of misinformation of fakes that Russian can generate. First of all, it's deep fakes, which are fake videos, which may look like real, and in connection with the development of AI tools, it can be a real problem. Another one is partial deepfake, when, for example, the video is real, but the voice is not. But you will have, but yes, it can be really hard to check, except to check different sources of information. And then it can be fabricated captioned videos, for example, then when media or those accounts can be mimicked to the real ones, and they will spread fake information. Again, chatbots. It's actually a separate topic for discussion, since Russia tried to feed the internet with lots of fabricated data, and of course it influences how chatbot behaves when you ask them questions about Ukraine. Also, AI-generated images of soldiers and their families. For example, a soldier had their birthday and nobody congratulated him, and so on. And also AI content to enhance emotional impact. Usually it shows how great Russians are, strong Putin, and so on. This can be very popular on Twitter, now X. And the aim is to show that the support to Russia is big, and maybe also to discourage and demoralize people. Let's talk about some of our case studies. We conducted a research about the ruining the reputation of our funds. And as we noticed, 36% of attacks came from Russian organization or organization connected with Russia, and which is really dangerous, 52% of attacks came from Telegram. The attacks actually had a very different how could I say it? Yes, they look differently. Some accused Ukrainians, for example, for not Ukrainians, but the foundations for misusing money, for for using them for their own purposes, for example, or they accused leaders of an organization, claim that they had some political ambitions. They bought, for example, a house for organizational money, and so on. And all of this was aimed to discourage Ukrainians from donating to charitable foundations, which are a great help for our army. Actually, they have been a great help since 2014. I suppose we can also talk a little bit about a Moldova case, since Russia also tries to attack them very actively. And they're actually the same as in Ukraine. They try to target not only people, but also political organizations and so on. They use, again, they use everything here. And first of all, these are political party. Amongst them, there is Patriotic Party, which unites socialists, communists, etc. And actually, Igor Dodon, maybe you can see him on the presentation, is like a known Russian asset in Moldova. They also try to target not only directly pro-Russian politicians, but also those who formally supported European Union or were neutral. They also try to target them. The same as in Ukrainians, they can use politicians who have deep Russian connections, like education in Russia and so on. So they also try to, yes, use any source they can. They also use the media, church, and so on. The great problem is that even though Moldovan government tries to fight those disinformation, tries to fight Russian fakes and so on, it is really difficult because Russian try to, yes, they really create a lot of media outlets and so on. They those channels in media or Telegram, they have a lot of clones, mirrors, and so on, and that can make it much difficult to fight. And I suppose church should have a separate block here. Yes, because most people in Moldova are Orthodox. Actually, 95% of Moldavians are Orthodox, and most of them like follow not Romanian but the Russian Orthodox Church, which is also a great problem because yes, they don't have a separate independent church, and Russia can use the church as a great influence for the people, especially who are in vulnerable conditions. For example, Metropolitan Vladimir, who is a metropolitan of church of an Orthodox Church in Moldova, he even received an order of friendship from Putin for his significant role in preserving Russian heritage in Moldova in 2019. And this is like an indicator that Russia tries to influence Moldovan people via its church. Unfortunately. Now let's talk a little bit about the prediction about future information trends, which actually these were considered for the beginning of yes, which trends we will notice in 2026 according to World.com and BBC predictions. So we talked a little bit about AI, and the predictions are that there will be AI's industrialization of misinformation, which means that fake videos, images, and so on will become better. Yes, the quality will be better, and it will be much harder to fight them. They will be easier to make, and sometimes it will be even harder to distinguish from the real ones. So that's why it can be a great problem for our future work. Another one is anti-disinformation and fake facts, which is connected with the fact that, for example, some platforms like Meta or X, they weakened their infrastructure that supports truth and supports fighting with fakes, fact-checking tools, and so on. So it can, without some centralized tool or something like that, it can even be harder to distinguish what you can trust on social media or not. Swinging gates is connected with that, for example, with that generative AI will impact how we create, distribute, and access information, whether true or false. AI tools, they are becoming like the information for great keepers. A lot more and more like social media and media uses AI nowadays for its work. It is both connected with software, and they're used by presumably some journalists and media creators. So it also can be a real problem, since more and more information will be concentrated in AI, in the tools. Yes, will be going through AI tools. who knows wins. It is another problem which is connected that it's hard to distinguish in long term how fake disinformation and so on influences people's mind, how or their behavior, and most researchers don't have the access to social media platforms in terms of their data, how they gather data, what they do with it next. So it also can be a problem because the one who know how to behave with it, how, for example, some disinformation affects influence them, they will have more power and more influence, which gives them, which can give them like better condition in modern world. Another one is rebuilding trust because PR campaigns and some official government organizations, media and so on, they will have to rebuild trust when everything can be fake. They will have to try more. They cannot only they cannot no longer simply manage their reputation through strategic messaging. They must actively defend themselves in the modern world of fakes. And actually, these are predictions by the Center of Counter and Disinformation for December 2025. But as we can see, most of them were true. So let's review them too. So we can see that there is continued disinformation campaigns surrounding negotiations to end the war, and we can see that it is true. There are a lot of news in different channels every day, even something news spread about Russian claims and so on. And of course, it spreads misbelief and so on amongst Ukrainians and the Europeans too, actually. Intensifying fear-mongering regarding the situation on the front line, for example, everything is bad, we have no chance, we should do something, and so on. Manipulations concerning the state of Ukraine's energy system, where we talked about them a little bit earlier, that Russia tries to use it to polarize people and so on. Disinformation campaign following Russia drone infusions into Moldova and Romania, which is that Russia will try to blame Ukraine for drones on the territories of other states. There will be a revival of pro-Russian narratives about the Euromaidan, which is first when Russia will say that it was a coup, that it was that Nazi people took part in it, that it was organized by somebody else and so on, and that maybe you have already seen the messages that Euromaidan was a mistake, that we have war because of it and so on. So Russia always, again, will tries to use this tool for spreading its propaganda. And it also will use the BRICS counterterrorism conference to advance Russia's propaganda and political influence in the global south, which is also quite obvious that Russia will try to influence people in those countries. Also, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha stressed that Russia continues to intensify its information warfare. Despite a slight reduction in military spending in 2026 budget, it increased funding for propaganda by 54%. So yes, Russia won't stop its propaganda, even I suppose even if there will be some kind of peace deal or something like that. So maybe you have any questions regarding this presentation topic or maybe our activity.
Thank you, Anastasia. Are there any questions, please? Yes, please, microphone.
Thank you for your presentation. I would like to ask a question. Is there any hope that there will be any AI tool or something like that, that every person could check if the message he receives is true or fake?
Well, I don't believe that it is possible in the nearest future, because AI tools, they can gather information from all the sources. They can, of course, try to help you detect the fake information, but I don't think that there will be a single tool for fact checking. The best thing you can do, I suppose, is to yes, try to check information yourself and not to trust AI tools in this case too much. But I suppose I don't know if there is any tool now which can do it, but you can ask, of course, some AI tools about how to check, or, for example, if it can give you any hints on how to check some information or what can be suspicious. But again, I don't think that there will be such a tool in the nearest future which will give you the exact answer.
Thank you. Anyone else? If I then may ask, in the beginning of your presentation, you also mentioned that 59% of people are vulnerable. How do you define who is actually vulnerable, who is not? Because in my opinion, everyone would be vulnerable.
Yeah, I agree with you. Everyone can be vulnerable. It wasn't our test. It was part of a research which we talked about of, I suppose, yes, of a rating group, and they conducted a test on people, giving them. I think I can come back to these questions, yes, so that I can demonstrate. Yes, so these you can see the question that people were asked, and yes, and how they answered on it. For example, and based on that, they, for example, try to make this analysis and statistics. So if, for example, a person answered, for example, that it is forbidden to listen to songs in Russian and Ukraine, the person was like tagged as a vulnerable, yes, because they believed some misinformation or some misleading take. Yes, so it wasn't. It just was a test which can show how many people are more likely to believe some manipulative or misinformation news.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you so much, Anastasia. Thank you for your presence today and for your insightful presentation. And we can move on.
Yes.
So we have one more online presenter that will be joining us. Is Denislava Sherba. She's a journalist and analyst at Internews Ukraine, and she will share Ukraine's experience in building information resilience during wartime. So please welcome Denislava.
Dear colleagues, greetings to everyone. I'm really glad to be here, to be a part of such essential event, and thank you for an invitation. Please let me know if you see my slides. I suppose yes.
Yes, everything fine.
Yeah, thank you very much. And my speech will be devoted to, I must say, a bit polarized concepts. I want to talk again about disinformation, about Russian disinformation that targets Ukraine. And I wanted to talk not only about Ukrainian informational environment, but also about narratives that are disseminated in the EU member states. But so as not to be so pessimistic, I also wanted to present cases of solidarity, experiences of different media organizations and activists who are involved in combating these malign informational impacts. So I really hope that my presentation will be interesting for you, and in the end, we'll be glad to answer all your questions. Before I start, I want to go to general aspect of Russian disinformation against Ukraine and actually how it transformed. Because if we are talking about this phenomenon, it's essential to remember that it didn't begin in 2022 after the beginning of the full-scale war. We are talking about more complex phenomena that began long before, even before 2014, when Russia occupied Crimea and launched combat actions in the Donetsk region. Particularly if we are talking about Russian disinformation in the mid-2000s, we are talking about dehumanizing Ukrainians, creating the image of Ukrainians as people without normal education, people who are aiming to make some profit on Russia, who are stealing gas. It was also very popular narrative, and who are like Russians, but not completely Russians, and they are so not educated enough. What is essential here is that Russians didn't use only news and some like political content, but they also involved entertaining content that presented Ukrainians in some films, serials, in some comedy shows. And this entertaining content played a great role in constructing this discourse. What's more, Russia was also selling this content to Ukraine. And unfortunately, if we look at Ukrainian media market at that period of time, we can see many Russian content. And of course, all this content was selling this image of Ukrainians. So we are talking here about this, I must say, dehumanization. It wasn't aggressive as we have it now, but it was aiming to construct this image of Ukrainian as a person that is not educated enough and that is taking profit from Russia, that is dependent from Russia. Then, if we moved forward to 2014, when the Revolution of Dignity began, this image transformed, and after Euromaidan protests, Russia was aiming to present Ukrainians and those who are not grateful to Russia for all this help, who want to be a part of the EU, but this is the result of some international influences, of some so-called foreign agents inside the Ukrainian society. And in this way, Russia was trying to discredit protests and discredit Ukrainians who were supporting the EU integration. Also, unfortunately, such messages appeared in Ukrainian media environment as well. And this created this polarization between Ukrainians in one hand, as well as added more to dehumanization. Then when the occupation of Crimea began, Russia decided to change this narrative and present Ukrainians as so-called terrorists who discriminate Russian-speaking people, who are making so-called genocide on Donbass. And this was also a communication product that was sold not only to like Russian internal audience, but also abroad. Unfortunately, even now, when we monitor EU informational space, we can see how people are writing about these events. We can see some comments from bots who are talking about so-called war crimes of Ukraine committed on Donbass or in Odessa. So that is the narrative that was unfortunately sold to the foreign audiences. Yeah, that also impacted the, I must say, perception of Ukraine abroad. What I have here on the slides is that I wanted to show how disinformation transforms, because when we look at the period of 2014, these cases were a bit, I must say, not so sophisticated as we have it now. There was no artificial intelligence, there were not so developed technologies, and in some cases that looked, honestly speaking, a bit ridiculous. For example, this woman on the slide, it's one of the most, I must say, famous case of Russian disinformation against Ukraine. This woman, who was then filmed in other propagandistic news programs, she told about so-called war crime of Ukrainian military committed in Slavyansk in the Donetsk region. And this became a symbol of Russian propaganda because it was without facts. This program was used to present how the Russian disinformation worked. But if we look forward, if we look to what happened after the beginning of the full-scale war, it became, I must say, more weaponized. When we look at the period of 2014, Russia was constructing this image of Ukrainians as people who are committing war crimes against Russians, who are committing war crimes against Russian-speaking people. And it was so during this period of 2014-2022. Also, there were narratives about so-called destruction of Ukrainian values, destruction of Ukrainian sovereignty because of the EU integration. But so added something to this dehumanization of Ukrainians, but it wasn't that, I must say, that weaponized as we have it now. Everything changed after the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine on 24th of February 2022. Actually, some Ukrainians had a question when it all began, why Russians don't react to war crimes that are committed in Ukraine, why people support these terrible war crimes that are ongoing. And here we talk about some really terrible cases when state propaganda was not only justifying war crimes such as sexual violence against women and girls, such as killings of civilians, torture, and Russian propaganda was also in some cases mocking the victims, as well as encouraging committing more and more crimes. And we are talking here about extreme dehumanization. That is really essential to understand here that this dehumanization was an essential part of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine. And what I have here is an article of Russian state news agency called RIA Novosti that published an article titling What Russia Has to Do with Ukraine. And this article, in my opinion, is the best example that illustrates this phenomenon. We see here that Russia is not only encouraging committing some executions, some imprisonments of people who were supporting the armed forces of Ukraine, of people who were fighting against Russia on the combat field. We are talking here not only about elimination of people who express active pro-Ukrainian position, but here there are some lines that are telling that all the Ukrainians are so-called supporters of Nazis. That's why they have to be persecuted and they have to be punished for this support. Additionally, this article talks about elimination of any Ukrainian organization, anything that is connected with Ukrainian culture and identity. And why I wanted to show it here is that because it shows how actually propaganda and disinformation works, how it can develop from this funny image of Ukrainians that was used in the mid-2000s to extreme dehumanization that we unfortunately have now. Also, if we look at Russian disinformation and propaganda now, I must say that it also transforms, it reacts to some changes in society, and my colleague from Malfara has presented some cases. What I wanted to add here is that it adapts to various audiences. We talk here that narratives that are targeting internal Russian audience are different from the narratives that target Ukrainians now. Through the network of some Telegram channels, of some pro-Russian figures, and in Ukraine particularly, it plays on some social problems, on social polarization differences. Russia also plays on frustration after the attacks, after problems with electricity, and in this way it tries to demoralize Ukrainians and actually provoke general mistrust in the society. But additionally, Russian propaganda also targets international audiences, adapting to local contexts. And I want to show how it works in this more international dimension. I want to talk about Russian informational manipulations and interference into informational environment of the EU member states, because it's also essential. In many situations, there is a stereotype that Russian propaganda works only inside Russia, and it's not so effective in the EU. But in my opinion, it is so, and we should be aware of these influences. And when we are talking about these informational manipulations and interference, we should understand that we are talking here about strategic, coordinated, and planned manipulations aimed at undermining democratic values and procedures. Therefore, we talk about some set of actions that involve informational interference, that involve manipulation, that involve various tactics aiming to undermining the general democratic values, general democratic institutions, particularly the EU institutions, and Russia tries to use either state or non-state actors to make these influences. When we're talking about non-state actors, there is a network of pro-Russian public figures, media outlets, pseudo-NGOs, also pseudo-experts, and all of them are involved into making this influence. And as well, they are, I must say, useful tools because they know the local context better. They know what is painful for each society. And these painful points, Russia is trying to manipulate. Actually, if we're talking about this phenomena, we're talking here about using of either disinformation, propaganda, and limitation of access to credible information. On my next slide, I will show some cases that may present all of these three types, but what I wanted to say here is that this is more complex, and we talk here not only about fake news and disinformation, we talk about a multifaceted approach aiming at interfering the informational environment and then influencing the public opinion inside the member states of the EU particularly. And also here we're talking about so-called 5D method that is also essential, and we talk here about such tactics as dismiss, distort, distract, dismay, and divide. What does it mean here? We can see that this approach aiming at polarization and division is an essential part of each this informational manipulation campaign, and Russian propagandists are trying to use polarization inside every society and play on this polarization. We could see this actually during elections in different countries, for example, in Poland, in Moldova, in Romania, in Germany, and in many others. But this use of polarization is something that remains with Russia during many and many years. Actually, we also had it in Ukraine, and we see that this tactic is adapted to different local contexts. What is also essential here is this concept of dismay. And we see that Russia is also trying to play on strong emotions, particularly on emotions of fear. And that is what used in, for example, anti-migration rhetoric, anti-refugee rhetoric. As we could see here, non-state actors are also involved into these informational operations. And when actually the society is under fear, under any strong emotion, it's easier to impose so-called right narratives. That's why emotions and fear in particular are also used in these informational operations. And also another aspect that I want to present here is this distraction. It's also essential because when something is ongoing, when there are some social problems, these actors are trying to distract public attention. Also, this distraction may include manipulations with emotions, manipulations with fears, but this distraction is also used to create the right, I must say, right attitude, right opinion, and it is also used in disinformation campaigns. Here I have some cases that are essential for understanding how actually it works. I talked here about disinformation, propaganda, and limitation of access to credible sources. And now I want to explain what did I mean actually. If we're talking about limitation of the access to credible information, the most significant example is so-called Operation Doppelganger that was used by Russian security services during presidential elections in the EU member states. Actually, it was detected in Germany, in Poland, also in France, and in other countries. What did it include? It included creation of so-called clones of credible news outlets that are popular in each country, but these clones were disseminating news that were actually fake, that duplicated Russian narratives, but they were masked under the label of credible news source, and that's how the access to credible information was limited. For example, as you can see here, there are many cases. There are cases from France and Germany as well. There are news with titles, is there any Ukraine in Ukraine? Or, for example, the school in Bremen was exploded because of the economy of gas. So yeah, actually we see that it simply duplicates the right news that were useful for the Russian propaganda, but it was rather hard to distinguish it because it wasn't published in some anonymous account, in some, I don't know, social media groups. It was published under the label of credible news source, and it was a threat that aimed at impacting public opinion, related either to some electoral attitudes or to the support of Ukraine during the full-scale war. Another aspect that I want to point to is propaganda, and we are talking here about creating the positive image of Russia. It's also very essential because there is a network of bloggers from different countries who create lifestyle content about life in Russia, and in this content there is nothing about the war, there is nothing about Russian war crimes, about things that Russia does in occupied territories of Ukraine. It only presents Russian culture, Russian cities, and yeah, it aims to create the image of Russia as a state that is accessible, that is comfortable for foreigners. For example, there is an account, Sasha Meets Russia. I suppose that this author is from the United States, but I'm not sure. Yeah, she creates such entertaining content about Russia on her social media. And what's more, she also says that those who are telling that Russia is a terrorist state, they are victims of propaganda, and it's better to go to Russia, see everything with their own eyes. And yeah, this narrative about, I must say, so-called influence of Western propaganda is something that is repeated by different bloggers who film life in Russia. Also, for example, from my experience, I was working on the article related to disinformation in Poland and in Ukraine regarding Ukrainian and Polish relations. And there were some blogs called Polak v Moskva and some others who are simply creating content about life in Russia, about benefits of living there. And of course, there are no remarks about the war in Ukraine. And lastly, if we're talking about disinformation campaigns, there are many that are going in the EU, unfortunately, but I wanted to point to one that is adapted to different countries. Here is the example from Poland, but yeah, it's not only in Poland, you can see it also in Germany and in other countries. So it's a slogan, "This is not our war." And that is something that is repeated in different EU member states, that it's not Russia that conducts aggressive war, it's not Russia that uses this expansionist rhetoric, but it's Ukraine that doesn't want to sign peace agreements. And in this way, using such campaigns that involves bots, some public pro-Russian figures, that involves fake news, these actors are trying to impact the public opinion and, of course, decrease the support to Ukraine during the war. Also, what I wanted to say here is the use of pseudo NGOs in dissemination of Russian disinformation. I said in previous slide that this is also unfortunately popular tactics, and one of the most remarkable example is the Foundation for the Fight Against Repressions. Actually, the title of this organization sounds very credibly that it's something connected with human rights defense, but in fact it's an organization that was created by Prigozhin, and it disseminates Russian disinformation under the guise of human rights activism. Actually, As far as I know, this organization appeared under sanctions, and currently it's impossible to access their website in Ukraine. I suppose also in the EU member states, but I'm not sure. But what did this organization do? Actually, we are talking here about conducting so-called research about Ukrainian crimes. And the most significant example here was a research about the so-called ties of Ukrainian officials with the Italian mafia and trade of human organs and children in Italy. Actually, then some findings of this so-called research appeared in the media, appeared in some news outlets. They were duplicated, but yeah, actually, this article didn't have any evidence. It simply used quotes of pro-Russian pseudo-experts. But unfortunately, it was created in foreign languages, and then it was disseminated using various sources and aimed at impacting the public opinion about Ukraine. Actually, yeah, I went yesterday to this website to find some cases that can be presented here, and I found some of them. For example, this case is telling that in Ukraine, the parts of bodies of the dead soldiers are sold on the market so as to make a compensation for like a lack of products on the market. Actually, it sounds ridiculous, but that is something that is published on this website. And there are many articles accusing the EU leaders of violation human rights and freedoms in their countries. For example, here is a so-called research about Emmanuel Macron that claims that the EU efforts aiming at fighting disinformation violate the freedom of speech, actually, and undermine human rights and freedoms. In this way, we see how actually the right narratives, useful narratives, are disseminated under the guise of human rights content. And so as not to be so pessimistic, I wanted to say here about efforts that are made to combat the malign informational influences. I wanted to talk here a bit about the work that Internews Ukraine does together with our partners. The colleague from Malfa told a bit about some of these initiatives. The first one is the disinformation awareness and resilience project that is supported by the EU delegation to Ukraine, and we are happy to be the part of this project. In this project, we cover either regional or national dimension, because on one hand, the project team monitors national informational environment using some specific tools for this monitoring. Mostly we focus on social media and Telegram channels in particular, because as it was mentioned, unfortunately Telegram is now the most popular social media in Ukraine, and many Ukrainians use it as a news source. But also there are regional media, there are 12 of them that monitor informational environment in their regions. And it helps us to cover either macro or micro level, and monitor and analyze these narratives that target EU-Ukraine relations, and actually counter them. Also within this project, we had some educational events for media workers, for teachers, for youth, for civil society representatives, and we are sure that combining these two approaches, we may make change and actually decrease this malign impact. What's more, we also had a project called This Out, and here we combined either entertaining approach or analytical. On one hand, we had exhibitions that were devoted to countering disinformation. In this exhibition, people who came there could not only learn more about disinformation, about risks of this fake content, about the use of artificial intelligence, about deepfakes, but also make it in entertaining form. So it was conducted in many Ukrainian cities, and we got very positive feedback from the visitors. And also it included informational campaign involving videos, social media posts, some articles published in national media, and it covered the general topic of disinformation. We also paid attention to gender disinformation because it's also an important aspect, though it often remains under the focus. And combining these approaches, we are trying to decrease this impact. To conclude my speech, I would like to say that the development of disinformation involves us to be critical, involves us to be resilient, and involves us to remember about solidarity and unity with other people who want to preserve the truth and who want to protect the informational space from these malign influences. And I wanted to thank you for your attention and hope that my presentation was inspiring and interesting for you. If you have any questions, please let me know. I will be really glad to respond to them.
Thank you, Dzvenislava. Are there any questions to our presenter? Okay, if I may ask then a question to you, do you see what are the means of disinformations that seems to be the most efficient when we are talking about Ukraine case? What is working and what maybe is not actually working on Ukrainians?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. What I can say here is that Russians are using various tactics to target different audiences. What I mean here is that, for example, if we're talking about youth and teenagers, we can see here either entertaining content published on TikTok that includes some sentiments about nostalgia of 2000s when everything was good. There wasn't the war and Russia was a friend to Ukraine, though it's not true. And they may simply not remember what happened in this time because they were children. And yeah, this entertaining content may impact their I must say, attitude. Also, we talked here about Telegram, about use of suspicious ways to earn money, and unfortunately targets teenagers who are looking for fast money, and yeah, Russia may recruit them. What's more, when we're talking about older generations, we talk here about some Telegram channels. In my opinion, it's the biggest risk now because they are anonymized. It's impossible to make any verification, and they often share this fake and suspicious content. What's also I think that unfortunately it works is playing on public frustration because people are tired of the war, of combat actions. People are tired of constant attacks, and Russia is trying to use this frustration to impose the needed narratives, unfortunately. And we talk here about narratives about electricity shortages, about mobilization, about the ending of the war. Yeah, in my opinion, it's something that is unfortunately used. I must say that not all Ukrainians are impacted by this. The majority remains resilient, but there are some social groups that are more vulnerable to these influences. And this is a question what we should do to minimize them.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Я хотів запитати, дякую за вашу розповідь. Я хотів запитати, ви на останньому слайді привели приклади різного підходу до роботи з дезінформацією. Там був такий момент, як такий розважальний. А чи є якесь розуміння, там дослідження, чи якісь факти, наскільки воно впливає, тобто наскільки це ефективно, бо мені здається, дуже такий цікавий підхід зараз в сучасному світі. Якщо розваги, якби люди потребляють дуже багато, то такий спосіб роботи з інформацією, мабуть, має якийсь сенс. Чи є якась інформація? Дякую.
I will translate for our audience, and then you can answer if that's okay. So the question was, is this entertainment content is actually seeming to be efficient in spreading propaganda, and are there any research that can show that this is efficient way of spreading disinformation?
Yeah, thank you. Do I need to respond in Ukrainian or English?
In English, if it's possible. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, sure, thank you. I must say that I'm not sure whether there is any research, but when we are thinking about this approach with our team, we came to conclusion that there are many fact-checking media literacy projects, but all of them are very serious and they unfortunately target very limited audience. They target those who are interested, those who are aware of the activity of some, I don't know, governmental organizations, initiatives. And if we're talking about entertaining content, it's better approachable by the people. It's more engaging, and it helps to target those who could not be that interested in this topic. And yeah, that's why we decided to go into these two dimensions, either analytical, what we were doing previously, or this more entertaining, involving some entertaining content, involving cooperation with bloggers. Also, we were thinking about this. And yeah, in this way, we thought that it would be more complex and better for targeting various audiences. Yeah, so in my opinion, this entertaining content is sometimes even more approachable and can be make more change than analytical materials.
Thank you. One more remark? Yeah, please.
Я хотів питати, якщо можна, чи є якесь посилання, де можна подивитися на саме цей розважальний контент, і, щоб можна було десь поділитися, побачити. Дякую.
Are there any links where we can see this entertainment content?
Actually, it was published on the website of Internews Ukraine and on our social media. There were these exhibitions it was in spring, in autumn. So yeah, you can find it on social media of Internews Ukraine. It's on our Instagram and Facebook.
Thank you. Anyone else? One more question.
Thank you for the presentation. I would like to ask how does it look in your daily job? How long does it take for you to recognize if the information is disinformation or it is a true? So how it looks, how you do it, and how long does it take?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. Actually, I think it's really good that we are not fact-checking organization, because fact-checkers have to deal with it all the time, and yeah, it's really hard work. What we are doing, we are making, I must say, more analytical products, more general. We are not focusing at each fake, but we are trying to look broader and to find this general picture. What we also use, we use some technical tools for monitoring, and I must say that it makes the work more easy, because it helps to detect some cases, some narratives using keywords. And yeah, it's more easy, because before we did this manually, and yeah, this took some time. I must say that, for example, within this disinformation awareness and resilience project, we conduct the monitoring every month, and it takes some days to finalize the information, to write the analysis. But using technical tools, it's not that long that it used to be before, when we did everything manually.
Thank you. Any other questions? Then I think we can say thank you for your presentation, for your answers. Thank you, Zvenislava. Thank you for our presenter. So, dear guest, thank you all for being here today. That was our last speaker, and I'd like to make some small conclusion of, in general, what we learned not only today, but through the whole project that been. First of all, I think that we all can agree that this project was not only about disinformation as a concept, but about the daily life of Ukrainians here in Lithuania and how they are consume information, and most of all, how they are reacting on the disinformation. So we all seen from the research, and it's showing a clear picture that Ukrainians are living in two different informational worlds, because apart from trying to be integrated into Lithuanian society, Ukrainians are still following all the news from Ukrainian sources and Ukrainian sites. Also, second thing that we've seen, that Telegram and social media still continue to be one of the most reliable source of information for Ukrainians, nevertheless, is they are here or in Ukraine. And third clear picture that we can conclude that that Ukrainians, even so there are a lot of Lithuanian trustworthy media, Ukrainians unfortunately cannot easily reach them, either because of language barrier or just because general not knowing where and who they can trust. So I think our main idea and main understanding should be what would be our further steps, how can we change it, how can we proceed with all these findings and information, because sure, it is clear that it would be nice to have for Ukrainians here one reliable central source of information in Ukrainian language. It would be nice to continue some media literacy trainings for vulnerable Ukrainians that are still becoming vulnerable to disinformation and manipulations. And I very much hope that this project will be continuing in some other forms with cooperation with institutions and with active society further. But one positive thing that we all can agree, that it's nice to see that there are a lot of Ukrainians who are actually thinking critically, who are verifying information, who are interested in general in the media literacy, and they are information resilient in general. So don't forget to follow us on social media, follow the further event of Ukreate Hub. Thank you all for being here with us today, and for everyone who made this conference possible, that made this project possible. Thank you for your active participation. And so we are wishing you a happy holiday that are soon. So let this holiday be warm, calm, and nice as much as it's possible in our nowadays reality. So thank you again. Thank you for being here, and see you on our next events.